In the summer of 1977, New York City felt like it was unraveling. A massive power failure had plunged the boroughs into a 25-hour blackout, triggering widespread looting and a string of fires that left the Bronx in ruins. But the riots weren't the primary source of the city's dread. A phantom shooter was stalking the night, targeting young couples sitting in parked cars in secluded lovers' lanes. The police had few leads, but one consistent detail linked the random crimes together. A shooter used a .44 caliber bulldog revolver, a heavy, devastating weapon that earned the killer his first nickname, the .44 caliber killer. The killer soon escalated from shootings to taunts. He began leaving deranged, handwritten letters for the police and the press, adopting a new, more chilling moniker, the Son of Sam. The combination of random violence and theatrical media taunts convinced the public they were being hunted by a demonic mastermind, an unstoppable force that the NYPD seemed powerless to track. To counter the threat, the NYPD launched the Omega Task Force. It was a massive, citywide dragnet involving hundreds of detectives, all designed to outthink a criminal genius who was always one step ahead. On July 31, 1977, that massive manhunt collided with a routine 2:05 a.m. parking ticket. Two patrol officers had noticed a yellow Ford Galaxy parked in front of a fire hydrant and left a citation on the windshield. After the shooter struck again nearby, investigators traced every parking ticket issued in that specific neighborhood that night. The list narrowed the search down to one specific Ford Galaxy, registered in Yonkers. The supposed mastermind turned out to be David Berkowitz, a 24-year-old postal worker. His mugshot didn't show a monster. It showed an ordinary, unthreatening face that looked entirely out of place in a murder investigation. Catching Berkowitz ended the fear, but the arrest served as the inciting incident for a much larger story. The case would go on to alter American psychology, the media's obsession with crime, and the constitutional limits of the law. Berkowitz initially gave the public exactly what they expected, a sensational horror story. He claimed a 6,000-year-old demon spoke to him through a neighbor's dog, commanding him to kill. That narrative was the perfect tabloid fodder. However, decades of face-to-face profiling by behavioral scientists have since dismantled the demon story. Profilers found that the true foundations of his psychosis were much more grounded. His behavior was driven by profound social isolation, deep-seated shame, and a severe, escalating history of pyromania. Before he ever picked up a gun, Berkowitz was an adrenaline junkie who set over 1,400 fires across the city, meticulously logging the locations and weather conditions for each one. The supernatural demon was a psychological defense. For Berkowitz, it was easier to claim he was a puppet for the devil than to face the fact that he was a lonely man driven by violent, pathetic urges. The public was just as reluctant to accept the truth as Berkowitz was. They rejected the idea that a solitary, unremarkable loser could hold a city hostage. Journalist Maury Terry stepped into that gap. He spent decades pushing a theory that Berkowitz was merely the fall guy for a sprawling satanic cult that was still active on the streets. Terry focused on abandoned locations in Yonkers, like the stone columns of Untermeyer Park, which he claimed were sites for ritual animal sacrifices and gatherings. Terry spent 40 years spiraling into a labyrinth of theories he could never prove. By the time he died, the obsession had destroyed his health and his professional credibility. His descent stands as a blueprint for modern true crime conspiracy culture, a warning of how easily we can all lose ourselves when we search for complex meaning in a senseless tragedy. While Terry chased ghosts, the legal system was reacting to a different problem: public outrage that Berkowitz might profit from his crimes by selling his story to publishers. New York quickly passed what became known as the Son of Sam law. It was designed so that media profits generated by a criminal would be intercepted and redirected to their victims. But the law was written so broadly it eventually penalized unrelated authors, including a publisher of a book about a mafia informant. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court in 1991, setting the stage for a landmark battle over the First Amendment. The court ultimately struck the law down. They ruled you cannot penalize free speech based specifically on the subject matter of the writing, calling it an unconstitutional, content-based restriction. Paradoxically, the emotional attempt to silence the Son of Sam ended up strengthening the constitutional protection for the entire true crime industry. The ghost of the Son of Sam still haunts the way we consume crime. This single 13-month spree became the definitive blueprint for how modern media covers violence. The podcast we binge and the psychological profiles we study were all shaped by the fallout of this case. It exposes a recurring human reflex. When we are faced with inexplicable violence, we instinctively elevate ordinary criminals into sophisticated monsters to make the tragedy feel more significant. We look for cinematic villains, yet the capture of David Berkowitz was defined by its absolute banality. This story suggests that true evil isn't a supernatural mastermind or a hidden cult. It is often just a disturbed, lonely individual, undone by a mistake as beautifully mundane as a parking ticket.